Deep dives and blue skies. Welcome back to Talking Blue with Nick, the best Dodgers analytical podcast that you can find.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Talking Blue, the best Dodgers analytical podcast that you can find. I'm your host, Nick. Today you are listening to episode 76 of Talking Blue. I have not talked to you guys in a long time. Haven't seen you guys in a while. I think it's been 3 weeks. The last time I talked to you, of course, was when the World Series winded up. When the Dodgers complete the World Series, won the World Series. Here we are. It is now the first edition of Offseason talk, off-season podcasts, and all that stuff. Winter podcast here on Talking Blue. First time we're going to get to do any of that stuff. So I'm really excited about that. As you can see by the title of the video, Dodgers off-season preview. So, of course, I'll get you guys up to speed on a lot of things that has happened or not happened or all that kind of stuff. It's November 23rd at the time of this recording. That's probably when this podcast will come out. About a week away, a little less than a week away from Thanksgiving. Usually signals somewhat of an important time of the offseason. So, sometimes signings, trades will start to begin to happen after that. So hopefully everyone is enjoying the offseason so far and their winter, all that stuff. And, hopefully all you Dodger fans like myself are enjoying being world champs again, back-to-back, all the stuff that comes with that, enjoying the parade and just all the content and everything that comes out from winning the World Series. Interviews, the players go on so many talk shows, interviews, podcasts. There's all the cool shirts and all kinds of stuff that you can wear and buy that from the 2025 World Series. So all that stuff, it makes the offseason much more enjoyable when your team wins the World Series. I've gotten to now enjoy 3 off seasons where my team got to win the World Series, so it puts a lot less pressure on you as an organization to continue to win. Not saying that the Dodgers aren't going to try to do anything, but when your team wins the World Series, you don't necessarily go into that offseason saying, hey, what are we going to do here because we got to win it all next year. Of course, the Dodgers are still going to do that, but you guys catch my drift. You know what I mean. So, off-season talk. Quickly, some of my thoughts on the off-season. If you're new to baseball, which I would imagine not many of you are, but if you're new, maybe you are a fan of other sports, baseball off-season is a lot different than other sports, especially the other 2 major sports in America. It unfortunately is one of the few sad parts about baseball. Not that the offseason completely sucks, but baseball is not like the NFL or basketball. It is a long offseason. There is not any kind of, free agency opening period, like kind of in the NBA and in the NFL, where as soon as the offseason starts, you see a bunch of signings happen right away. And, if the offseason, goes past, if the free agency goes past the first 3 or 4 days and players are unsigned, it's like crazy that they're still unsigned. Baseball is the complete opposite. A lot of that has to do with collective bargaining agreements and all that kind of stuff. The Players Association, they don't want to have any kind of dates and all that stuff to have players signed by a certain date. We could go into a whole nother world about all that talk. But what it basically comes down to is the offseason is a long grind of nothingness. Rumors. Eventually, at some point, of course, throughout the offseason, free agents sign, and there's a lot of stuff to talk to. Usually the winter meetings is always something to mark on your calendar as a baseball fan. Usually some good things will happen there. But for the most part, it is just getting through pretty much about 3 months of rumors and, occasional signings and all that kind of stuff. So, baseball offseason is not the, sexiest of times. But regardless of all that, we have some players and some candidates to talk about. So, if you guys remember back in July, I did a trade deadline preview, and I kind of gave you guys candidates and potential players the Dodgers could acquire. So, what I have come up with today is 10 players that the Dodgers, I believe, will be in on in our candidates, matches, a marriage, whatever you want to say, to pair with the Dodgers. So, what I put together is 5 free agents, 5 trade candidates. Okay, and they are all players that I think will match up potentially with the Dodgers, where their needs are. I don't think they're going to sign or trade for all 10, of course. I just think it is, obviously when you go into the offseason, you look at your strengths and your weaknesses, where can you improve, and it's very easy to make the assumption that, a team that had a bad lineup is going to go out and try to, add bats, or a team that had bad starting pitching is going to go out and try to add starting pitching. You get the drift. So this offseason, interesting offseason, and especially with free agency, not a ton of major offseason names. It's kind of what I would consider like in the middle. It's not like those off seasons in the past where it was like Garrett Cole, Anthony Rendon, Steven Strasburg. But I wouldn't say it's an off season where you have nobody. The biggest player, biggest star, the guy who will get the most money in free agency is Kyle Tucker. He is definitely a superstar and a really good player. But after that, not necessarily a ton of superstars. The trade market has an opportunity to get very interesting and very fun if there are some players who are dealt. But it looks like it'll be a pretty interesting offseason. There's definitely a lot of some pretty solid starting pitchers on the market. As always, there's some interesting bullpen candidates. But when it comes to the Dodgers, we all know that their strength, at least as of right now, on paper, is their starting rotation. We know that the rotation consists of Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Shohei Ohtani, Tyler Glasnow, Blake Snell. Roki Sasaki is going to go back into the starting rotation, of course. He will not stay as a reliever. And then after that, it would probably be Emmett Sheehan. Those are the, right now, if you were to make a opening day rotation, if everyone is healthy, that would be the 6 starters. And then after that, they do have a lot of depth. 2 guys that should be coming back from injury at some point will be River Ryan, Gavin Stone. 2 rookies that came around. Stone debuted in 23, but both of those guys made a name for themselves in 2024 and, are projected to come back this year, or I should say next year, 2026. They have other guys, Landon Knack. They have a depth. They have other minor leaguers who are, top prospects who are projected to, make their debuts in 26. And then they could sign, maybe a veteran free agent, come spring training. Usually there are always some funky injuries and stuff like that. So in terms of their depth chart and their needs, starting pitching is not on there. I don't think they're going to really be in any of the free agent pitchers, especially none of the big ones. A couple of the Japanese players that got posted that are coming over, I don't think they'll be in on them either. And in my 10 players, none of them are starting pitchers. So of course it's bats and it is relief pitchers. Those are the mix of players that I have, and that's who I think the Dodgers are going to be in on and looking to acquire. Now, when it comes to the bat and what specific players, I think it's mostly outfielders that they're going to be in on. If you look at the way that their roster is constructed right now, when you look at the infield, it consists of Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Max Muncy, a couple other guys. Right now, I think that they would prefer to have Tommy Edman play center field. This is a little thought that I've been having. Ever since they acquired him in 24 at the trade deadline, they have preferred him to play center field. They tried to get him to play center that year, but he eventually played a lot of short with Mookie Betts going back to right. And then last year, at the start of 2025, he was supposed to play a lot of center field, but then he eventually dealt with the ankle issues, and when he came back, it was kind of hard for him to play a lot of center field all the way up until like Game 6 of the World Series, where it basically was like, hey, Tommy, play center field, and then he got a whole offseason to either get surgery or rehab it or whatever. So, in my opinion, if it was up to me, I think it would make the most sense for Tommy Edman to start the year as a second baseman, and if you're going to acquire some players, it would be outfielders, because then if Tommy Edman needs to play second base, if he re-injures the ankle or something like that, he can stay at second base. I think the easiest move for him was to just stick at second base, occasionally playing the outfield. Of course, they look at Tommy Edman as a utility player, so if he comes back and gets another surgery and he is ready to go and play center field, that would be great, and I would like that. But I just think with free agency trades, it's a little easier for the Dodgers to acquire an outfielder, have Tommy Edman be the second baseman. I think Hae-Sung Kim, there's a good chance he plays a lot more this year, plays a little bit of a more important role, and is kind of a one of their utility guys who gets a lot of time in the outfield. Stuff like that. We'll get into guys who are free agents for the Dodgers and all that stuff. So, Miguel Rojas is a free agent. Kike Hernandez as well. I wouldn't be shocked if he came back at some point. Again, we'll get into all that. Kirby Yates and Michael Kopech were also guys that will be gone. Michael Conforto, I think there's no shot that Conforto is back. Kopech could come back, but we'll see. Kirby Yates, no, I don't think he'll be back. And Miguel Rojas, it'll kind of depend on what Miguel Rojas wants to do. Because he actually is still a pretty solid player, and I wouldn't be shocked if a team like the Braves, like the Marlins, where he once played, and I think he still lives in Miami, teams like that could use a guy like Miguel Rojas, and I wouldn't be shocked. And I think that they'll eventually bring back Kike, kind of like they have the last 2 years in spring training. I actually thought Blake Trinan was a free agent for some reason, but he actually is not, so he is still a part of the team. So, yeah, Dodgers don't have a ton of free agents. They don't have a lot of guys that are leaving. So, those are my thoughts so far, 12 minutes into this pod. Before we kind of get into my free agents and trade candidates, let's go ahead and get into the guys that I have. So, I will just explain a couple things before I get into it. So I have 5 free agents, 5 trade candidates. I'm going to start off with the 5 free agent candidates. These are 5 players who I think match up with the Dodgers, and I think that the Dodgers, there is actually a real chance the Dodgers can sign these players. Now, it is listed from 5 to 1, so 5 being the least likely, 1 being the most likely. So who I have 5th, I think is a possibility, but I think it would be the most difficult for them to sign. And, I don't really, in the end, my prediction wouldn't be that they sign this player. The guys that I have 1 and 2, I think are really good shots, really good chances, make a lot of sense. So we'll go from 5 to 1, from least likely to most likely. Free agents, I'm going to give you guys who they are. I'll give you their age going into next year, how old they will be. And I'm going to give you, with the free agents, I'll give you what their contract is projected to be based on some research I've done, a couple ESPN articles, Fangraphs. What are they projected to make? Because all that stuff, obviously the Dodgers have one of the higher payrolls. I believe their estimated payroll for 2026 is about $330 million. So obviously with free agents, all that kind of the years, the average annual value, how much they're going to make per year, all that kind of stuff matters. And then with the trade guys, I'll do the same thing. I'll give you who they are, their age, and then I will give you either how much is left remaining on their contracts, or if, because a couple of those guys are, pre-free agency eligible, so what they're estimated to make in arbitration, all that stuff. I'll explain all that stuff. It gets a little complicated, but it's not too hard to understand. Number 5 on my list is an old friend, Cody Bellinger. So, again, he is 5th on my list, so I'll go out and say I don't think Cody Bellinger will be a Dodger. But a little bit of backstory. So, actually, if you got a lot of you guys probably don't know this or know much about me, Cody Bellinger actually was one of my most favorite Dodgers ever. When I was watching him, when he came up, he was a really fun player. And then 2019, he just had an incredible, magical season. It was one of the best seasons I've ever seen a player have, like watching him every single day on TV and seeing him in person a couple times and all that stuff. Cody Bellinger will be 30 years old next year. We obviously know he is an outfielder / first baseman. Played a lot of left field with the Yankees last year, but he's still a very good defender and could play center field if needed. And obviously the versatility is, an added bonus. If the Dodgers were to sign him, he would go back out to center field. I don't think he would play left field. I think that they would have Andy Pages slide over to right. Another thing I forgot to mention before I get started into this is I think one of the Dodgers' needs and kind of what they need to do going into this offseason is they really need to try to make sure Teoscar Hernandez is not in right field next year. There's a good chance they could actually trade Teoscar Hernandez out. I could get into that into later podcasts and maybe even in this pod. I don't think that will happen, but based on where his contract is and his age, he had a little bit of a down year. I wouldn't be shocked if the Dodgers tried to kind of shop Teoscar Hernandez. But in my mind, priority number one has to be that he is not playing right field in 2026. He is, maybe he's not on the team, but if he is there, he's playing left field. Because I still believe in him and think he's a good player and thinks, he crushes left-handed pitching and he's a good power bat. But I don't think you can have him in right field. And, I don't want to say it almost lost them a championship last year. They lost the championships. I mean, they won the World Series, so, that doesn't really matter in the end. But he was horrible in right field, and there were times in the postseason where he was close to losing them games at times. In the wild card round, in the second game when Yamamoto was on the mound, he straight up dropped a fly ball in that second game, and that cost them 2 runs. A couple games later against the Phillies, he didn't really hustle after a ball on the gap. Then there was a play in the World Series, actually at Dodger Stadium, where he tried to slide for a ball that he had no business sliding for. Should have just checked up and caught the ball on the bounce and kept the runner to a single, and eventually wound up being a triple. I think that was the 18-inning game, and, again, you just never know what could have happened. So it didn't cost them a World Series, so they could very, very much run him back out there. But he's a year older. He's already a really, really bad defender. That to me has to be a priority for them, is to make sure he is not the opening day right fielder. He's in left field at the very least. And like I said, I think there's a chance they could trade him, kind of shop him around to some teams who aren't afraid to add some payroll and maybe need a DH or something like that. Last year the Red Sox were in on him. The Pirates or the Marlins, teams who are, there have been rumors about those teams who don't spend a lot of money are trying to become a little bit more encouraged to spend money, so maybe something like that could happen. But in my offseason plans and these guys who kind of match up with the Dodgers, he's in left field, and I have other guys who would go over to right field. So like I said, Cody Bellinger, based on my research, what his contract projection is roughly about 6 years, $146 million. That would put him around 27.5 average annual value. So that would be about $27.5 million a year. Why I have Cody Bellinger on here? One, would he come back to the Dodgers? We know Cody Bellinger, I think it was 3 years ago at this point, or 4 years ago, was non-tendered by the Dodgers, and obviously went to the Cubs after that, and this past year was his first year with the Yankees. I think he matches up well with the Dodgers, obviously because he's left-handed. I think that the Dodgers would like to acquire a left-handed bat, and he is an outfielder, which is a need they have. He could play good defense in center field. One of the things that is kind of interesting is, he was non-tendered, so I think that a lot of players their personality would be like, they wouldn't want to go back to a team that non-tendered them, but Cody Bellinger, after watching him for a long time, he doesn't really strike me as that kind of guy. It's not that he doesn't have an edge on him, it's not like he doesn't have, kind of have that edge to him, to prove a team wrong or anything like that, but he doesn't strike me as that personality of like, screw the Dodgers, they non-tendered me, I wouldn't want to go back there. I wouldn't, I don't see him as that kind of person. I could definitely see it happening, but if you were to ask me, would I project him or predict him to sign with the Dodgers, I would say no. But I do think there's real interest. There have been reports that there is real interest, and like I said, that does make a lot of sense. And the team that I think he's going to go back to and end up on is the Yankees. But the Yankees just had Trent Grisham accept the qualifying offer. So there was a lot of players this year who accepted the qualifying offer. Teams can sometimes, when players are free agents, not every player, but most players are eligible to receive a qualifying offer from that team that they were on that year. And it's about $21.5 million a year. And most players do not accept it. Obviously the big time free agents like Kyle Tucker, those guys don't sign it. But there are some guys who do sign it. The Yankees offered it to Trent Grisham, who was a free agent. He actually accepted it, and there were a lot of reports that, it was a little shocking that he accepted that. And I just think that, doesn't ensure that Bellinger won't be back there. I think he still will end up back there, but it does make it a little bit harder for them. It increases their payroll, and obviously it's just another outfielder that they have. So that makes it a little more difficult for the Yankees to bring him back. But I just think at the end of the day, there will be other teams in on Bellinger, and it'll be harder for the Dodgers to bring him back. Now, like always, the Dodgers are very known for waiting around with free agents when it comes to, players that are projected to get big deals. The Dodgers, tend to wait around, see what the market is like, and if that player is not getting the market he anticipated, or if the teams aren't really matching the years and the dollars that player was anticipating, they could swoop in with a lower high AAV deal to throw at that player. They've done that a lot in the past. It doesn't really work out for them that often because there was one year where Bryce Harper was a free agent and they attacked him like that. It doesn't really work out with a lot of guys, but you never know. Sometimes a player's free agency could kind of go unexpected, and one of my next players is kind of similar to that. But and what also makes Bellinger a little difficult is that he has been very inconsistent in his career. Obviously, he was a former MVP with the Dodgers, but eventually ended up getting non-tendered. And free agency is scary to teams and front offices when there are players who have been inconsistent, because it's scary to think you could hand a guy a long contract, multiple years, a lot of money, and he could, the production could fall off at one point. But Bellinger has made a lot of changes to his swing and to his game, and I think that this time around in free agency, he's actually going to have a big market and a lot of guys, a lot of teams going after him, because I think that baseball is really not going away from home runs and slug and all that stuff, but I think there's been an emphasis the last couple of years on guys who play multiple positions, play good defense, stuff like that. And Cody Bellinger is one of those guys. And I think that he's really attractive to a lot of teams, not just the Yankees. I think the New York Mets are going to be on him. I wouldn't be surprised if the Blue Jays are in on him. The Giants, the Phillies. There's going to be a lot of teams in on him. I think he's going to have a big market. And ultimately, that's why I think in the end he won't be with the Dodgers, because teams like the Yankees and the Mets are going to really go after him hard. And he's going to have a pretty good market. And I just think that, like I said, he's going to be asking for around 5 to 6 years. If someone would even give him 7 years, if someone was willing to, he would take that, of course. And I just think the Dodgers at the end will just be like, the less they'll be the least desperate for Bellinger. So I think he's a match for them, and I don't think it will happen, but there's a possibility. It's on my list. It could make a lot of sense, especially if both sides are interested. But in the end, I would expect him to be back with the Yankees or something like that. So we'll go to my fourth option. On the list, like I said, we're going from 1 is the best option or the most likely, I would say, to 5. So fourth is Kyle Tucker. Yes, the number 1 free agent for this offseason, the player that is going to be handed out the biggest contract to, without a question. Similar with Cody Bellinger, he's left-handed, he's an outfielder, he's a year younger than Cody Bellinger, and he's obviously very, very good. Kyle Tucker is one of the better players in the game, one of the more underrated players in the game. If you go back and look at a lot of his numbers, this is his OPS every year since the start of 2020. 837 OPS, 917 OPS, 808 OPS, 886 OPS, 993 OPS, and then 841 last year. Really good player. He is pretty much a lock if he's healthy to hit 25 to 30 home runs, drive in close to 100 RBIs, steal 20 to 30 bases. He's going to have an OPS. He's going to have an on base in the mid 300s or higher. He's going to have an OPS well over 800. Really, really good player who also plays pretty good defense. We know that he was traded from the Astros to the Cubs a year ago. For whatever odd reason, the Cubs are not really rumored in on him. kind of had a weird year with the Cubs. He was really, really good and still put up good numbers, but he was a little dinged up. Numbers did technically drop off a little bit. In 2024, where he had an injury-plagued season, only played 78 games, his OPS was 993, which is monstrous. But if you look at the year before that, where he played a full year, 2023, 157 games, he had an OPS of 886. That's kind of more of the player that he is. An OPS in the 142s, and he hit 29 home runs. This year, in 2025, he played in 136 games, and the OPS was down to 841. So it was a little bit down, 22 home runs. He did have a couple injuries. I think he had like a calf injury that he was playing through. So that's kind of, I would imagine, is part of the drop-off. But by all, with all that understood and all that said, he is projected to get a contract, that the years should start with, it should be 10 years. There's, a chance it's 11, 12 years, given that he's pretty young. Most people seem to think it's going to be a contract over $400 million. The projections, that I looked up based on my research, 11 years, $418 million. That puts in the average annual value $38 million a year. So basically, just over $400 million, just under $40 million a year. Big time, long-term contract. So he's a really good player. So all those reasons, he's a good player, he's an outfielder, he hits left-handed, are the reasons why I think he is an option for the Dodgers. And, of course, the Dodgers are, a big market team who have a lot of high-paid players and the better players in the game. So they are one of the handful of teams that could afford him. Why do I have him on my list? Why is he fourth? Why is he not higher? Again, in the end, I don't really believe Kyle Tucker will end up on the Dodgers. I do think there is a really good chance of it. I do think it is realistic that he could be there. I think that there's been times in the last couple of years, particularly when Aaron Judge was a free agent, which was after 2022, and then when Juan Soto a year ago was a free agent. I think those were two times where the Dodgers were rumored to be in on those players, and they were definitely in on those players, but they weren't really in on those players because they weren't going to go to those lengths. They weren't going to sign Judge. They weren't they weren't going to go after Soto that hard. This is a player that I think they will truly be in on. And there's a couple of interesting reasons why I think it's a possibility. If you look at a lot of the big market teams, so of course in Major League Baseball, we know that there are a handful of teams that could sign a player like this. Obviously, a team like the Pirates, a team like the Cincinnati Reds or the Guardians, they can't really afford players like this. At least, their history shows that they can't because they don't hand out big contracts like that. The big market teams that could are the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, the Red Sox. The Chicago Cubs should be on here. They should be able to re-sign him, but for whatever reason, all the reports are that they're not going to be in on him. The Philadelphia Phillies are a team. The San Francisco Giants. I forget if I'm forgetting anybody, but those are the Toronto Blue Jays is another one. Those are really the teams that could be in on him. There are other teams like the Tigers, the Padres, who have handed out big contracts in the past, but those are pretty much the big market teams who can sign Tucker and will be in on him. If you look at all those teams, though, I think that there are reasons why it gets a little complicated. If you start with the Yankees, I think that they're going to prefer Bellinger. I think he's kind of like, Tucker's going to establish his market and his price tag, and then Bellinger is going to be like less than half of that. I mean, again, he's projected, Bellinger is, to get around $146 million. Tucker's over $400 million, so that is less than half of what Tucker is projected to make. And they are two left-handed hitting outfielders who are, bring power and defense. Again, Tucker is younger and has a much higher ceiling than Bellinger at this point. But there are a lot of teams that could look at that and say, hey, instead of spending $40 million a year on Tucker, why not spend 25 to 30 on Cody Bellinger, someone who's going to bring a lot of what Tucker does bring. So I think that the Yankees, I think they're going to be in on Bellinger and trying to sign him. The Mets don't really have a need for someone like Tucker after they brought in Soto. The Red Sox, again, I don't think they're going to be in on him because if you look at a lot of the players on the Red Sox and their outfielders, it's a bit crowded, and a couple other players, one of their players is actually a part of my trade candidates. So I don't think they're going to be in on Tucker because their need is kind of more pitching, and they have a crowded outfield, so I don't think they'll be in on him. The San Francisco Giants and the Philadelphia Phillies, I think, are two sneaky teams that could be in on him. Now, I think the Phillies are going to worry about other things first, like bringing back Kyle Schwarber and, some other things. I don't know that they'll be in on Kyle Tucker, but I think that there is a chance if they really want to that they could definitely get that done. The San Francisco Giants are another team that could afford him and definitely could go after him, but they have had issues at signing big free agents. I think that could change with Buster Posey there, especially because Kyle Tucker is kind of like similar personality, it would seem, to Buster Posey, so I could see that fit. And then the team that I think he will wind up on, and there have been a lot of rumors, is the Toronto Blue Jays, who are a big market team. They are kind of similar to the Dodgers, that they have a very rich ownership, and they kind of have the kind of ownership that can just write any kind of check that they want. And I could see the Blue Jays going in on Tucker, especially given the fact that they did not win the World Series. I know they were only, obviously, a win away from beating the Dodgers, but they lost the World Series. That kind of gives them that added bonus of, like, we want to get back to the World Series because, not every team is like the Dodgers. We're spoiled as Dodger fans that there's a good chance the Blue Jays won't get back to the World Series. That was their best shot to win one. Obviously, in their mind, they think they can get back, but, the losing the World Series does give them an added, motivation to get back there and sign Kyle Tucker. So I think that there's a good chance that he winds up there. But like I said, kind of like how I mapped out all those teams, it kind of gets a little funky for him. There isn't the best landing spot. There isn't the easiest landing spot for him. Again, I think that if a couple teams like the Phillies or the Giants really pony up and really want him, they could get it done. So because of all that, I think there's a chance that we go through this offseason and Tucker's market is not what he quite thought. And like I said earlier, with what the Dodgers have done in the past and what they have shown, is that they could be waiting around for his decision. A couple teams, like I said, the Mets aren't really in on him. The Red Sox are focused on pitching. The Yankees signed Bellinger. Maybe the Blue Jays just bring back Bichette and they go after some starting pitching. Maybe they sign like a Framber Valdez. The Phillies bring back Schwarber. The Giants, go another route. And then Bellinger's Tucker, I should say, is kind of left with not many options. And the Dodgers swoop in with a low average annual, contract. Again, they could go the long-term route, 10 years, $400 million. I don't think they'll do that. They could, offer Tucker a 5-6 year deal with opt-outs. Maybe it's like 6 years, $200 million, like something crazy like that, where he gets, he still gets the big money per year, but he has opt-outs and he can establish his market in the future. I think that's a way that the Dodgers could get Tucker. And I think that, his market's going to be a little harder. There is not like a perfect team out there for him. So those are my reasons why I think he could end up with the Dodgers. But I just think ultimately, because of what he's going to demand, I don't think he's going to wind up with the Dodgers. I think a team like the Mariners, the Giants, who are kind of more in that situation of, more in the position to just say, hey, screw it, we'll give a guy however many years, X amount of years, we want to get better and we want to win. So where I think, again, the Dodgers, they don't need to add a Kyle Tucker. It would be more of a, I don't want to say luxury because they do have holes in the outfield, but you don't need, when you have the highly paid players they already have, they don't need a Kyle Tucker. But it's a real opportunity. It's a real possibility, and I would not be shocked if it happened. Just my final prediction would be that it would not happen. So we'll move along. We'll keep it moving. I don't want to take too long on this, but the third player I have is a reliever, the first of my relievers, and the next three guys that I have are relief pitchers. So Edwin Diaz is the third player that I have. The closer of the New York Mets is a free agent this year once again. So I'll be pretty quick on him. 32 years old is what he will be next year. Contract projection, a little all over the place, but 4 years, $60 million is what I have, which actually puts him at a pretty friendly average annual value. For a reliever, it's high, but, for a team like the Dodgers, $15 million a year is not a lot of money, especially when you consider guys making well over $25, $30 million a year. $15 million a year is pretty friendly. Like I said, Diaz is 32 years old. One of the better closers in the game, arguably the best closer in the game. It's kind of funny because back in the day, Edwin Diaz was like polarizing guy. His first year with the Mets, he was horrible. He had an ERA well over 4. But ever since then, 2020, 2021, 2022, he was injured 2 years ago, but 2024, 2025, he always has an ERA under 2. 2024 was the only year he had an ERA over 3, which was 3.02. Big strikeout guy. He's pretty durable. For the most part, he's always going to throw over 50 innings, 60 innings. He gets a lot of strikeouts. His slider is really nasty. Even though he's going to be 32 years old, his fastball still averages 97 miles an hour. Like I said, the slider is one of the best pitches in the game. He is up there with the highest whiff percentages and K rates in the game. He probably is the best closer in the game. And obviously, the Dodgers' probably biggest need is in the bullpen, and he is, the best reliever out there. Now, reasons why I think it won't happen versus why I think it will happen. The why I think it could happen is because obviously their need for the bullpen, but if he does not go back to the Mets, I think he's going to go to the Dodgers. I think his market, and again, based off of reports I've read and things that I've seen, his market is go back to the Mets, sign with the Dodgers. I'm sure there will be other teams in on him, but that is what it kind of seems like. If he's not going back to the Mets, the Dodgers will go after him. Now, reasons why I think it is a little, scary is because we just saw 1 year ago the Dodgers signed a closer to a pretty big deal in Tanner Scott. And we saw how that turned out. Now, just so you guys know, I think Tanner Scott will be better next year. And, I think he'll be better going forward. And I do think they will get some value out of him and out of that contract. But giving a reliever a lot of money is scary because, relief pitchers are the most volatile position in the game. They're the most up and down. You see relievers every year who are horrible, come back the next year and are great, go right back to sucking, back to being good. It's not unlikely, and it's not, that happens a lot, and that's why it's scary to give guys big time deals. But Edwin Diaz has been very consistent. He is really good, and the Dodgers could hand out a contract like that. And Edwin Diaz, who's been there with the Mets a lot, the Mets are kind of like a interesting organization. They're trying to change the narrative of that organization, but they're kind of a team that always has a lot of drama around them. They're always second fiddle to the Yankees. They spend a lot of money, but they've had a lot of years, like last year where they missed out on the playoffs, 2 years ago where they missed out on the playoffs. And I could see Edwin Diaz, who opted out, thinking, why not go to another team? Obviously, as a closer, he's going to go to a team that's trying to win. And I could really see him saying to himself, if the Dodgers are in on me, why would I not want to go there? Go to the team that just won 2 World Series where I'll slot in as the closer. I think there's a really good chance that could happen. But the only reason I have him in the third spot, third likely to happen, I have 2 guys above him that I think are more likely, is because of the money he's going to demand. I just think that Andrew Friedman in that front office is a little bit more, they would rather sign some free agents to a 1-year deal, reliever free agents, that is, or some trades, than spend big money on a closer. I think that the Tanner Scott deal kind of scared them a little bit. I wouldn't be shocked of that. So that's why I have my Edwin Diaz is a strong possibility. I would not be shocked at it. It depends on what the front office wants to do. But the only reason I don't have him the most likely or a little bit higher is because I think that these next 2 guys are a little bit easier to get a deal done. And plus, I also just think that the Mets are going to really want to bring him back because if you look at their bullpen, they have nobody if they have no Edwin Diaz. The Dodgers, there's always this narrative. There's been this narrative about the Dodgers, how badly they need bullpen, which they do, but they could have guys back there that would be pretty solid if they didn't do much. If you look at the New York Mets bullpen, they need Edwin Diaz to come back. So that's also another thing, is that they'll be a little bit more desperate in trying to bring him back. So we'll go to the next two guys. My next two guys, the guy who is second as most likely to happen, is Devin Williams, reliever, who of course was the longtime Brewer, who got traded to the Yankees a year ago. I have him as the second most likely reliever. I could really see the Dodgers getting Devin Williams. So, some info on Devin Williams. 31 years old next year. He is projected to get around 3 years, $45 million, which is interesting. I would have thought it was a 1-year deal. So, of course, if you don't know, Devin Williams, one of the better relievers in the game ever since 2020. There were times where he was a setup man for the Brewers. He eventually became the closer of the Brewers a year ago before free agency. The Brewers traded him to the Yankees. He had a pretty nightmare year with the Yankees. It was a little bit overblown about how bad it was. It was not the, he still had a lot of very good metrics and a lot of things that make him good. But this is a classic bounce-back candidate kind of player. If you look at Devin Williams' numbers ever since he's been in the big leagues, this is ever since 2020 where he was the Rookie of the Year. An ERA of .33, 0.33, 250, 193, 153, 125. Last year with the Yankees, it was 4.79. So he struggled last year. He has that one unique pitch, that changeup that he uses, and then he throws a lot. He throws two pitches, changeup, fastball. His changeup is still one of the best pitches in the game. He is still one of the best pitchers in the game at striking out guys and getting whiffs, 97th percentile in chase percentage, 99th percentile in whiff percentage, 97th percentile in K percentage. Now, he did struggle with the walks last year, and that's usually been his, bugaboo throughout his career, is allowing walks. And he was pretty bad at that last year. But that's something that happens a lot with relievers. It was just kind of like not a great marriage for him. He was supposed to go in there and be the closer for the Yankees. Instead, he struggled all year. All year, it was like their version of Tanner Scott. All year, he struggled. He was blowing saves. Yankees kept rolling him out there, and by the time the playoffs came around, he was not really an option to close games. And he's definitely not going to go back there. Now, the 3 years, 45 is interesting. I think that probably means that teams still view him as a guy that is going to be really good going forward, and that was just one blimp year, one bad year. So I think he's a really good pitcher, and I think he's going to bounce back, and I think there's no doubt about that. And if you go back to a year ago, the Dodgers did try to trade for Devin Williams. He actually said in an interview he thought he was going to the Dodgers in that trade. I remember the trade was in December of last year. He thought he was going to the Dodgers. So clearly there's been mutual interest in the fact that he was interested to go there via trade. Obviously the Yankees as well. The Dodgers tried to trade for him. I think there's a chance he could sign with the Dodgers for a 1 or 2 year deal. For a player like him, it's all going to be about selling to him how you can make him better. For a front office can kind of sell to you like, hey, you were mishandled. It wasn't your fault that you were bad last year. We can fix some things about your pitches, the way you attack hitters, maybe your arm angle, all that kind of stuff. The Dodgers are right at the top of the leaderboard at that kind of stuff, with organizations like, the Astros used to be known for that. The Red Sox have kind of started to create that the last few years. The Blue Jays are another team. Like, there are these teams that have these upper hand on pitching and how to develop pitchers and kind of how to fix guys. The Dodgers are one of those teams, one of those organizations. I think that they've really liked Devin Williams for a couple years. I think they really wanted him a year ago. I think he would love to pitch there. I think there's a really good chance it happens. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I would not be shocked if they signed him and he bounced back in 2026. I think there's no doubt about it. He's just been really good throughout his career, with the exception of last year. His career ERA, even with the 4.79 ERA that he had a year ago, his career ERA is 2.45. He is a career 14.1 strikeouts per 9. So that changeup that he throws is a very unique pitch that you don't see a lot. He still has pretty good velo on the fastball. I could really see it happening. I think it would make a lot of sense. I think he would start out as a setup guy or something like that, and eventually he would prove that he could be the closer. I could just really see it happening. I think there's a really good chance the Dodgers could get Devin Williams. And the only reason he is not one like this next guy is because he's going to have a pretty good market. There's going to be a lot of teams. I could see him going to the Blue Jays. I could see him going to the Mets. I could see a team like the Chicago Cubs, the Giants, really any team that is trying to win, that is going to sell to him, we can fix you and get you back to that all-star level, is a really good suit for him. So I think that is the only reason he's not one on my list, because if it wasn't for that, I think he would be one. But this next guy comes in at number 1, and he is another relief pitcher. It is Pete Fairbanks, formerly of the Tampa Bay Rays. So he is my number 1 free agent candidate that kind of matches up best with the Dodgers in my assumption, and just based off of what I know about them as an organization, seeing the way they've attacked free agency and off seasons for so many years, I think he is someone who is kind of like the most likely to wind up a Dodger. Again, you never know how it's going to play out, but Pete Fairbanks is number 1 on my list. So Pete Fairbanks, 32 years old as of next year. Projections are around 2 years, $28 million. He could get a 3-year deal. He could get a 1-year deal. That puts his AAV at about $14 million a year, which is not too crazy. Pete Fairbanks, like I said, formerly of the Rays, very good relief pitcher. So if you go back and look at a couple of his seasons, he has had pretty much every year the last 3 years, he's had a full season, and he's had an ERA of 2.58, 3.57, 2.83 as of last year. A little earlier in his career, 2020, a 2.70 ERA, 2021, 3.59. In the past, was a big strikeout guy. The last couple years, his strikeout rate has gone down a tad. Not getting a ton of strikeouts, not getting a ton of whiffs, but he still has had really good seasons. Another guy who has a very good slider, 4-seam fastball combination, throws very hard, upper 90s fastball. I could see the Dodgers fixing him up a little bit, changing some stuff with his fastball, maybe with the slider as well, and finding out a way to create a little bit more swing and miss. But the last 2 years, even though he hasn't had a ton of swing and miss like he has had in the past, he still had really good numbers and had really good seasons, and he's kept the ball on the ground. So Pete Fairbanks, obviously of the Tampa Bay Rays, we know Andrew Friedman has his ties to the Tampa Bay Rays. I could see him I could really see him being a similar guy to what Blake Trinan was. If you go back 5 years ago, Blake Trinan was non-tendered, I believe, by the Athletics. The Dodgers signed him, and he ended up being a very good high-leverage reliever for them for years, after previously being good in Oakland. But then he kind of fell off a little bit, and then the A's were just cheap organization that non-tendered him. Same thing with the Rays. I think his option was for like $11 million, and they didn't even pick that up. So Pete Fairbanks is one of those guys who has the opportunity to kind of be an under-the-radar sign a 1-year, 2-year deal with the Dodgers, maybe even 2-year deal with an opt-out club option kind of situation. Like I said, $14-15 million a year, just under-the-radar signing, and then you look up next year, and he's one of the better relievers in the game. He has been, since 2020, one of the more consistent relievers in the game. The only thing that's kind of fallen off in his game the last couple of years is the strikeouts and the swings and misses, like I said. But he still has put up pretty solid years. All of that stuff, the fact that, the Dodgers, yes, they need relievers, but one thing they don't really need is left-handed relievers. They need right-handed relievers. So that's why I think he's a good match like the other 2 relievers that I mentioned. And I just think that he's most likely, because he's not going to have as big a market as guys like Diaz and Devin Williams, the money that he's going to demand, the years, the market that, he'll be involved with other teams. All of that, I think, makes him the most likely and kind of like, who I could really see. I really think he's going to end up with the Dodgers when we look back at this offseason. We'll see. You never know. Predicting teams and predicting free agents for a team is difficult to do because you never know where they're going to go. But that is what my those are my free agent, candidates for the Dodgers. 5 players. I know that was a little bit long, but we have Cody Bellinger 5th, Kyle Tucker 4th, Edwin Diaz 3rd, Devin Williams 2nd, Pete Fairbanks 1st as my most likely guy. So we'll go to trade candidates now. So I'm going to have 5 guys. I'm going to try to do this a little bit quicker, but I have 5 players. None of them are relievers or starters or anything like that. None of them are pitchers. They're all position players. Like I said, I don't think they're going to be in the starting pitching market. And then trades for relievers are a little bit less common in the offseason. That's more of a trade deadline thing because usually you have bad teams who are signing relievers, so then they can eventually flip them at the deadline the following season. Usually it's the trade deadline where you see relievers get traded, relievers that are on bad teams and that kind of stuff that they don't need. So in the offseason, there's not as many guys. So same thing, trade candidates from 5 to 1, least likely. All guys that I think are in play, all guys that I think the Dodgers will check in on. But like I said, from 5th, from least likely, 1 to most likely. So we will start with the 5th guy, Byron Buxton of the Minnesota Twins. This would be the best player that the Dodgers could acquire, I guess, outside of Kyle Tucker, but definitely the best trade acquisition that they could make. Byron Buxton, 32 years old as of next year, Minnesota Twins. So, of course, he signed an extension with the Twins a few years ago, and he's got a pretty team-friendly deal. 3 years remaining, $45 million left on that contract. So that puts him at $15 million a year. So if you acquire Byron Buxton, he goes onto your payroll. It's only $15 million a year. Byron Buxton is one of the more electric, just like all-around players in the game. He put up an 878 OPS in 2025, and he hit 35 home runs as a center fielder that plays some of the best defense in the game. And even at his little bit older age now, like I said, he's 31 years old. He'll be 32 as of next year. He is still in the 100th percentile in sprint speed. If you don't remember, if you go back 10 years ago, Byron Buxton was one of the top prospects in the game who was elite speed, elite defense, and the only question was how was his bat going to play? And he had, like I said, he was one of the fastest guys we'd ever seen. And 10 years later, after dealing with a ton of injuries, the fact that he is still one of the fastest players in the game is pretty crazy. I think it's only Bobby Witt Jr., Trey Turner, and one other guy that I'm forgetting that are faster than him, maybe Corbin Carroll. Other than that, he is still one of the 5 fastest players in the sport, which is pretty crazy to think about. And then a few years ago, he really changed his game when it comes to his offensive profile. If you go back and look at every year he's been in the big leagues and look at his OPS, his rookie year in 2015, 576, 2016, 714, 2017, 728, 2018, where he only played 28 games, 383, 2019, he only played 87 games with 827 OPS. 2020, the shortened year, where he also only played 39 games, 844 OPS. From 2021 on, now again, he's been injured every year basically since then. 1,000 OPS, 833 OPS, 731, 859, and then last year 878. So he's really changed his game where he used to be a speed outfielder guy that was like a solid hitter to like pretty much like MVP territory. Now, the biggest trade-off with Byron Buxton is that he's pretty much the most injury-prone, like, star player in the game. He's like the Anthony Davis of baseball. Like, he's never healthy. If you go and look at his games played the last few years, 2025, which was a full season by his standards, 126 games. So he still missed like 30 games on the year. But 2024, 102 games, 2023, 85, 2022, 92, 2021, 61. So he rarely even plays 100 games. But he's a big-time power guy, a lot of pop. Now, he does swing and miss a little bit, but you are getting one of the best players in the game, one of the more talented players in the game, who I think has only been in the postseason like 3 times in his career. Now, the difficult thing about Byron Buxton is that he has a no-trade clause, and reports have been, while the Twins have been trying to sell off players the last few years. They traded away Carlos Correa. They traded away a couple other guys, and they have a couple guys on their roster that they still could trade away. He wants to stay in Minnesota. Now, the reason that this has become a possibility is because there are reports in this offseason that he is more willing to waive that no-trade clause and be traded. So if that's the case, I think the Dodgers will definitely be in on him. The only reason that it's fifth, and it's why it's the lowest player that I have ranked, is because it's going to be difficult to acquire him. It's going to be a massive haul. Will he even want to be traded? And he's going to have there's going to be a ton of teams in on him. If he is available, teams like the Yankees, the Mets, the Phillies, those kind of teams all need outfielders and will be in on him. But if he truly is available and he is truly willing to waive that no trade clause, the Dodgers will definitely go after him hard, and they could float a package to him that the Twins would like because they have one of the top farm system in the game. I could see, Dalton Rushing being the head of that trade, maybe one more top prospect, and then a couple other guys to kind of help facilitate that trade. It wouldn't be easy to get Byron Buxton, but considering that his contract is very team-friendly, and a lot of times when you have big players like that traded who have big contracts, like I said, it's team friendly, but for the Twins, it is kind of a big contract. If they're trying to clear payroll, they're one of those teams like we've seen the last couple of years who's been having financial issues. They could be trying to clear that contract, and sometimes you see in trades, if a team is willing to take on a lot of that contract, it kind of lessens what you need to give up in terms of prospects. So I could really see that happening, but it is at the bottom of the list because there's a chance he's not even traded and all that stuff. But if he was traded and he is possibly truly out there, the Dodgers are going to do everything they can to acquire him, given their need in the outfield, given how good he is and how dynamic he is, and given the fact that they're a good team that wouldn't have to run him into the ground and could try to preserve him, have him play 120, 30 games to keep him healthy. But man, Byron Buxton, you guys know I'm a Dodger fan, but I'm also a baseball fan who watches a ton of baseball. One of my more favorite players in the game away from the Dodgers because he is so electrifying, so fun to watch. Every year you just pray that guy stays healthy like he did last year, and you see, mid 800s OPS, 30 plus home runs, electric defense. He's one of those guys that he's not the best center fielder in the game because of his health issues, but if he is healthy, an OPS of 800 with 35 home runs, that's the best center fielder in the game when healthy. So we'll go to my fourth player, my first infielder that I have, Brandon Lowe of the Tampa Bay Rays, second baseman. So again, I talked about it earlier, how Tom Yedman, where he going to play in the future makes it a little bit difficult. I think it is more likely the Dodgers acquire outfielders. But, of course, if Tom Yedman is ready to play center field, move around a little bit, Brandon Lowe, who has 1 year left on the contract extension that he signed with the Rays, 1 year, $11.5 million remaining. So you get Brandon Lowe, it's 1 year, $11.5 million. That is cheap for the Dodgers. He is another guy like Byron Buxton who is a really good hitter who provides a lot of pop. So let me give you some numbers on Brandon Lowe. Didn't have the craziest of years in 2025, but he did hit 31 home runs. He had an OPS of 785. The year prior to that, 21 home runs. Going back to 2021, he actually hit 39 home runs. So Brandon Lowe is one of those guys who is a pull hitter, slug. Even though he's a small guy, he's one of those like typical 2025 hitters that you would look at him in the past and you would think like he's a slap hitter, he's a guy who hits for average. He is none of those things. He has a career batting average, just to give you guys a reference, of 247. But he has a career slugging percentage of 481. That's very good. A career OPS of 807. He has 157 home runs in his career. He is a bad defensive second baseman. He does not play good defense. In the past, he's been a better defender, but he doesn't play great defense. He is a second baseman who's out there for his bat. And, of course, Tampa Bay Rays, we know. It's been rumored they're going to try to shop him. I could see him as a fit with the Dodgers. Again, Andrew Friedman, the Tampa Bay Rays connection. He won't cost a lot of money. He's a little bit of a platoon player, not a guy who doesn't face lefties, but obviously hits much better against righties. And as I start to think about it out loud and sort it all out, I could really see the Dodgers going after him, given how much he would cost, and he wouldn't cost too much in terms of prospect capital. So when you take that all into account, how much his contract is, what it would cost to get him, then when you take into account the fact that he is left-handed, hits right-handed pitching well, you could actually sit him against lefties, especially nasty lefties, and you could have Tommy Edman kind of platoon with him a little bit. You could have Tommy Edman, play second base against lefties, and then you would have Andy Pages and other guys out there. And I could really see him fitting in. 31 years old. Like I said, the contract is pretty friendly. The only reason I have him as a little bit lower than some other guys is because, one, he's going to have a market. There are going to be players, other teams trying to acquire him. And again, I think it's more likely the Dodgers acquire outfielders. But other than that, Brandon Lau is an interesting player, a lot of power, a lot of pop. He would be, a really good guy that you could slot into the 5th, 6th, 7th slot in the lineup, play second base. Again, he's not going to be a great defender, but the Dodgers do have guys like Tom Edman and Hae-Sung Kim on the roster. If they need to, late inning defensive replacements. Like I said, Lau wouldn't play a ton against lefties, so there is that aspect. They could kind of hide his defense. Second base, you definitely want to have a good defender over there, but given the fact that it's the closest throw in the infield and all that kind of stuff, you can live with a guy who doesn't play great defense if he brings it with the bat, which Brandon Lau does. He is a pretty good player, pretty good consistent player. Will strike out. Last year he didn't have great numbers with his chase percentage and his walks, but he hits the ball very hard, hits the ball in the air, pulls the ball. He kind of just is a Dodger player that is like similar to Max Muncy, not with the walks and stuff, but like, a guy that's going to hit for power. They do like those guys, and I could see him. I could really see the Dodgers going after him. But he comes in at 4th on my list. So we'll go to another guy, another second baseman, the last infielder I have as an option for the Dodgers, and that is 29-year-old Brendan Donovan. Utility player for the Cardinals. He is really just a second baseman at this point, but he has played more positions in his career. He has played left field, right field, shortstop, third base. He is a legitimate utility player, but for the most part this year, second baseman. His defensive metrics aren't necessarily great, but again, when you're a utility player who sees a lot of different positions, your defensive metrics are, they can be a little bit skewed. In the past, he has had good defensive numbers, like in 2024. He was really good with outs above average. But last year, he did not have the best of numbers. I believe he was an all-star in 2025. I could be wrong on that. But one of the better hitters in the game when it comes to combining batting average and on base. There have been rumors of them being interested in a trade for him. There were at the trade deadline. And again, just like Brandon Lau, he would slot into second base. And what I also think makes him a little bit more likely is he does bring a little bit of a more utility aspect to him. And in some world where you acquire Brendan Donovan to be your second baseman and something happens with Tommy Edman where he can't play the outfield again, and you have to have Tommy Edman go back to second, Brendan Donovan does bring the ability to go to a corner outfield spot, play third base. He is not just a second baseman, so he brings that part of his game. One of the better contact hitters in the game, like I said, when it comes to whiff rate, 95th percentile. When it comes to not whiffing, 92nd percentile in striking out, not striking out. So he puts the ball in play, and he also has very good plate discipline. He had a 353 on base, has no pop, doesn't hit a lot of home runs, only 10 home runs, but a versatile player, 775 OPS, so he can handle the bat. Again, he wouldn't be a flashy move or a big-time bat that they were acquiring, but again, a guy that you could slot in the bottom of the order, gives you professional at-bats, versatile, and there's been smoke with them acquiring him before, and I think he's definitely going to get traded this offseason. So I could really see a possibility there. Again, the only reason he's not higher is because there's going to be a lot of other teams in on him. And I think that the last two guys I have in this video are outfielders who I think the Dodgers are just going to, be more in on. So the second to last guy that I have is a guy that I talked about last trade deadline, and that is Lars Nootbaar, also of the St. Louis Cardinals. Of course, Lars Nootbaar, we know his ties to the Japan. He is a guy who's actually from Southern California, but part of his family is from Japan, so he played in the WBC for Japan. 28 years old. He has 2 more years left of arbitration. So if you acquire Lars Nootbaar, you get him for 2027 and 2028, or excuse me, you get him for 2026 and 2027. And for arbitration, he's only estimated to make around $5 million. So he's not expensive, and you get him for 2 years, which is obviously good because you're not giving up a lot of prospects for just 1 year. He's been a pretty solid major league player. Now in 2025, he definitely struggled, but if you look at a lot of his advanced metrics, there's kind of like no explaining why he was bad. He had a 686 OPS, which is not good, but if you look at a lot of his numbers, he was in the 87th percentile in hard hit rate. He has really good bat speed. He's 78th percentile in squared up percentage. Does not chase. He's in the 87th percentile in chase rate. Did not whiff a lot, and he walks a ton. So he's one of the best players in the game when it comes to his process at the plate, not chasing pitches out of the zone, walking, all that kind of stuff. And he has the ability to hit the ball hard. He's had years in the past where he's hit for some power. He's been a pretty good player with the Cardinals his first couple of years. In 2022, he had 14 home runs. 2023, 14 home runs. In the past, he's had an OPS of 739, 788, 784, 758. So he's kind of a guy that can give you that high 700 OPS, 15 to 20 home runs, good on-base numbers. I think the Cardinals will be looking to move him. He is younger. He, in the past, has played good defense. Not necessarily great defense last year, but he has a good arm. So I think he could go out to right field. I think, he's young enough that he could be a pretty good defender. And he's a left-handed bat, of course. Now he's played more left field in his career. So if the Dodgers were to acquire him, would they like him in right field or left field with Teoscar Hernandez? Again, if it was me, I would put him in right field. I like the cool Southern California ties. I think he was a USC guy, actually, and also the Japan aspect. I think he's a very energetic player who has a big personality. I could really see him fitting in to the Dodgers. I could see them kind of tapping into him and making him a better player with a lot of his really good, like hard hit rates and his, bat speed, his plate discipline. I could really see them acquiring Lars Nootbaar. He could have a nice 340, 350, 360 on base, an OPS in the high 700s. He could be, hide a little bit in the lower in the lineup and be a really good bat for them. And maybe the Dodgers could even acquire him in a Brandon Donovan trade. Both of those guys, that'd be a pretty big haul. But considering how young he is, what he's estimated to make, and the fact that you could probably get him for a little bit of a cheaper trade, considering that he had a down year, I really like that move. I think that they could get a lot out of him. I've been a big believer in him for a while. I think he could really bring a lot to the Dodgers with his energy, with his plate discipline. I think that's another reason the Dodgers would go after him, because they love guys who walk a lot and don't chase. And again, just how sick would it be? His Japan ties, his Southern California ties, all that stuff. That'd be really cool. And again, why I think it's more likely than some of these other guys is it wouldn't be a huge haul to get him. The Cardinals would be looking to trade him to create space for some younger guys, and you wouldn't have to give up like a huge top prospect to get him. You could probably give away like a Bobby Miller to get Lars Nootbaar, something like that. I think I could really see that. So Lars Nootbaar comes in at 2, and then in the number 1 spot to trade for my number 1 option, Wilyer Abreu of the Boston Red Sox. So if you don't know much about Wilyer Abreu, he is a very young 26-year-old left-handed hitting outfielder for the Boston Red Sox who's played mostly right field in his career. He actually has won a couple of Gold Gloves already in his career, so he's one of the better defenders when it comes to right fielders, who just finished up his 3rd year in the big leagues, 2023, 2024, 2025. You have 4 years of Wilyer Abreu if you're able to acquire him. And the Boston Red Sox, who have a lot of outfielders, a little bit of a crammed outfield, trying to trade outfielders, it's either going to be Wilyer Abreu, Jarren Duran, and if it were me, if I were the Red Sox, I would keep on to Willie or Abreu over Duran. But I think there's a chance Abreu gets traded. Only 26 years old. Like I said, 4 years of control, so he's making nothing. He's not even making $1 million. One of the better defenders in the game when it comes to right field. Like I said, he's already got 2 Gold Gloves. And in terms of outs above average, he was in the 94th percentile. He's a super strong arm. He's a really good hitter against right-handed pitching. Now, he struggles against left-handed pitching, which makes him a little bit of a platoon guy. But I think that the Dodgers have what they need on their roster to kind of pair him with Abreu, and that is Alex Call, who is a right-handed hitter who hits well against lefties. So against lefties, Abreu could sit. He has had an on-base over 300, but he's had a slugging over 400, 474, 459, 469. Not like Lars Nootbaar in terms of the plate discipline. He does chase a lot and he will strike out. But he hits the ball very hard. He hit 22 home runs last year. I think he's got a ceiling where he can get even better, especially given the fact that the Dodgers kind of like platoon guys to get the most out of those guys. And then you pair that with the fact that he's a great defender. You put Teoscar in left, you put Abreu in right. That is a very good defensive right fielder that would improve your overall defense. I really like Abreu. I think I have him as number 1 as, a guy who kind of is a combination of left-handed bat, left-handed hitting outfielder. Wouldn't cost a ton to trade for him, especially given the fact that the Red Sox are a team that already have a big farm system, a loaded farm system, and they're trying to win. So it wouldn't be a ton to get him, but the years of control, with the years of control that he has, you would have to give up some real prospects to get him. But I have Willie Abreu at number 1. I really like the fit there, and I think there's a good chance that the Dodgers could get him. But we'll see. There will be other teams trying to acquire him. Like the Phillies will be in on him. Other teams, I could even see the Padres, stuff like that. So we'll see. I gave you guys a ton of information. I hope you guys enjoyed. Those are my 5 free agent candidates, 5 trade candidates, my offseason preview, all guys that match up well with the Dodgers. We'll see what the offseason brings us. As the offseason plays out, I will do podcasts talking about rumors. Obviously, I'll be reacting to any kind of acquisitions the Dodgers make. If they bring back any guys, trade away any guys, any of that. All Dodgers news, I'll be on here to report and to talk about. Like I said, rumors. The winter meetings is going to be coming up in a few weeks, so that will be some exciting stuff to talk about. So, as always, you can get this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can follow us on all social media at Talking Blue Pod. You can follow myself at Talking Blue Nick on X. I tweet a lot about the Dodgers. I'm going to start tweeting out more stuff as we get into all these signings and trades. And you can follow us as well on Reddit at competitive-week8715. Thank you guys so much for listening. Stay tuned to the Talking Blue Pod all off season. It's your best place. It really is your best place for Dodgers stuff. For Dodgers content. I'm going to be talking about the Dodgers all off season, getting you guys ready for 2026. So thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you guys next time on Talking Blue.